In round two, Deacon reinforces his position that Israel is historically located in the Middle East by presenting a series of historical and biblical references. These are some of the historical references that he provides. He cites Tacitus. Deacon cites this Roman historian who mentioned Jesus in his execution by Pontius Pilate, indicating Roman activity in Israel, not in sub-Saharan Africa. He mentions Philo and Josephus. So he references both these first century Hebrew historians for their account of Roman interactions with Israel, including invasions and subjugations. He mentions Herodotus, who he says is known as the father of history, and he described Israel as being situated between Egypt and Phoenicia. He mentions Aristotle. He referred to the Dead Sea as being in Palestine, supporting the Middle Eastern location of Israel. He then uses biblical references. He cites Genesis 12, where he uses this passage to illustrate Abraham's journey south to Egypt, aligning with a Middle Eastern location for Israel. He cites 2 Kings 2:24. He argues that bears mentioned in this passage are native to the Middle East, not sub-Saharan Africa. He mentions the Queen of Sheba, where he states that her title as the Queen of the South suggests Ethiopia is south of Israel, not north as it would be if Israel were in sub-Saharan Africa. He cites geographical and logical arguments. Deacon questions the plausibility of the Egyptian army drowning in the Nile, suggesting the Red Sea crossing is more feasible. He asserts that major empires like Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome never conquered sub-Saharan Africa, but did conquer Israel, as documented in the Bible. He challenges Ron to address the biblical locations of Edom, Moab, and Ammon, which are stated to border Israel. Overall, Deacon's round two position is well supported by historical and biblical evidence, reinforcing the traditional view of Israel's location in the Middle East. Deacon's second round can be rated quite highly due to several key factors. Number one, use of historical sources. He effectively incorporates well-known historians like Tacitus, Philo, Josephus, Herodotus, and Aristotle, which adds credibility and depth to his argument. Number two, biblical integration. By referencing specific Bible passages, Deacon strengthens his position with religious texts that are significant to the debate, appealing to audiences who value scriptural evidence. Logical consistency. His arguments are logically structured, connecting historical and biblical evidence to support the traditional view of Israel's location in the Middle East. And then he challenges his opponent. Deacon also challenges his opponent to address specific geographical and historical points, which can be effective debate strategy to highlight gaps or weaknesses in the opposing argument. So overall, I must say that Deacon's second round is well constructed, persuasive, and grounded in both historical and biblical evidence, making it a strong performance. In round two, Ron Dalton Jr. presents a series of arguments challenging conventional views about the location of Israel and supporting his belief that the true land of Israel is in sub-Saharan Africa. Number one, skepticism of historical records. Dalton questions the reliability of archaeological evidence, suggesting it could be manipulated or lack proper documentation. He doubts the authenticity of Greek and Roman historical records, proposing they might be fabricated or altered. Number two, geographical and environmental argument. He argues that the land of modern day Israel is too barren to support the agricultural and livestock needs of the ancient Israelites. Dalton claims that the characteristics of the land described in the Bible, such as fertile soil and abundant resources, align more with sub-Saharan Africa. Number three, cultural and linguistic point. He finds it implausible that the Israelites could have quickly adopted Greek language and customs after Alexander the Great's conquest. Dalton emphasizes the importance of Bantu oral history and scientific facts over historical texts authored by non-Israelites. Number four, genetic and historical claims. He asserts that the DNA of the Bantu people, which includes unique haplogroups, supports his claim of Israel's location in Africa. Dalton highlights the migration tradition of the Bantu people from Egypt southward, aligning with his belief in the African location of Israel. Number five, biblical and traditional evidence. He references biblical descriptions of the land's resources and wildlife, suggesting they match those found in Africa. Dalton mentions ancient African tribes and their traditions, which he believes correspond with biblical descriptions of ancient peoples like the Canaanites. So overall, Ron Dalton Jr.'s round two position is built on a combination of skepticism towards traditional historical narratives, reliance on oral history and genetic evidence, and reinterpretation of biblical descriptions to support his claim of Israel's location in sub-Saharan Africa. In his second round, Ron Dalton Jr. emphasizes the significance of Bantu oral history as a crucial element in supporting his claim that the true land of Israel is in sub-Saharan Africa. He argues that the Bantu people have a tradition of migrating south from Egypt, which he believes aligns with the historical movement of the Israelites and supports his theory of Israel's location in Africa. Dalton suggests that Bantu oral history and scientific facts should be prioritized over historical texts authored by non-Israelites, referred to as Gentiles, implying that these oral traditions provide a more authentic and reliable account of history. Overall, he uses Bantu oral history to challenge conventional historical narratives and reinforce his argument for the African location of Israel. So, Ron Dalton Jr.'s second round can be rated as compelling and thought-provoking, particularly for those open to alternative historical interpretations. Here's a breakdown of his strengths and areas of improvement. Number one, strength, challenging conventional narratives. Dalton effectively questions the reliability of traditional archaeological and historical records, encouraging the audience to consider alternative perspectives. Number two, integration of oral history. By emphasizing Bantu oral history, he introduces a unique cultural perspective that is often overlooked in mainstream historical discussions. Number three, use of genetic evidence. His reference to DNA evidence adds a scientific dimension to his argument, appealing to those who value empirical data. Number four, biblical descriptions. Dalton's use of biblical descriptions of the land and its resources provides a familiar framework for audiences who value scriptural evidence. Now, his areas of improvement. Number one, lack of specific biblical references. While he uses general biblical themes in round two, more specific chapter and verse references could strengthen his argument for those who seek detailed scriptural backing. Number two, skepticism without alternatives. While he questions the authenticity of traditional records, providing more concrete alternative sources or evidence could enhance the credibility of his claims. Number three, complexity and clarity. Some of his points, particularly regarding historical manipulation, could benefit from clearer articulation to ensure the audience fully grasps his arguments. Overall, Dalton's second round is strong in its originality and challenge to established views, though it could be bolstered by more detailed evidence and clarity. So in round two of the debate, both Ron Dalton Jr. and his opponent, Deacon, present strong points that bolster their respective position. Determining who won round two depends on the criteria used for evaluation. Here's a breakdown based on different aspects. Ron Dalton Jr.'s strength, innovative perspective, challenging conventional views. Deacon's strength, use of established sources, logical structure. What is the conclusion? It all depends on the audience preference. So, if the audience value innovative perspectives and alternative interpretations, they might lean towards Ron Dalton Jr.'s argument. However, if they prioritize traditional evidence and logical consistency, Deacon's argument might be more convincing. Ultimately, I would say that the winner of round two could vary based on the audience's values and the weight they place on different types of evidence.